It's crazy because like literally like days after these murders happened, he brought it up when I saw him in the hallway. He was like, "Oh, did you hear about these murders that happened?" And it was like so short after they actually happened. Like there was barely any news articles out, so there wasn't much that I could have like read. So I was like, "Yeah, man, that's crazy." Yeah, of course I've heard about him. And he was like, "Yeah, it seems like they don't have any leads." And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's not much about it, you know, there's nothing, I have no details really to say. But yeah, and then he's like, yeah, it seems like they think it was a crime of passion. Those were the two things he said, was that they had no leads and they think it was a crime of passion.
I want to bring back Sierra Gillespie. She's from the Law and Crime Network. She's the reporter behind this investigative piece. It's fascinating to hear people who lived so close to him and had, repartee with him, to hear what they have to say about him. The neighbor across the hall, the wife of that neighbor, had something very unique to say. And I think the wording is that she felt something was off. Can you explain?
Yeah, Ashley, that's correct. So the man we just heard sound from, Chris Martinez, lived across the hall from Bryan Kohberger until his arrest. And when I spoke with him, he said he was nice to Kohberger. You know, he talked to him, tried to take him under his wing, but it was Martinez's wife that always felt something was strange. He described what his wife called a death stare, that Kohberger would just kind of look at you and maybe even try to analyze you a little bit. And so oftentimes when Chris would say, "Hey, I'm going to invite Bryan," she would say, "Please don't." She kind of felt uncomfortable around him. So it was later, the hindsight, that really made them realize, okay, maybe his wife was picking up on something that Kohberger was putting out there.
Okay, I want to play something if I can. I'm going to tell the control room it's something about it's a pool party that happened in the summer before the murders. And Bryan Kohberger was at this pool party, as were a lot of other guests. And there's sort of a unique description of his personality that stemmed from this pool party. And I want to play that. Let's have a look at it.
He mainly just stood to the side and was really observant, and so much so that based on that one small interaction, he knew exactly who I was maybe a month or so later when I saw him on that hike. It was really weird how he approached me and the people that I was with, because he acted kind of like we were best friends, or it was like a reunion or something, and he was really excited to see us, and I had no idea really who he was right at that second.
Sierra, that's so fascinating that he seemed to glom on to people who barely even knew he existed.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. A lot of the people that I spoke with said the same thing over and over. Kohberger was a loner. He didn't have a lot of friends. But the people that I spoke to in Washington said over and over, he was analyzing people, kind of taking mental notes. So it seemed, so that man right there that we just heard from, Zach Cartwright, he didn't even remember Bryan Kohberger when he saw him again, but Kohberger knew exactly who he was. So I don't know if you can necessarily say that's calculated, but we can likely say that Kohberger was taking mental notes about people and keeping tabs on them.
Can I ask you about this very chilling series of texts that's on our screen right now? It might be kind of hard to read, so I'm going to read a little bit of it. But correct me if I'm wrong. Chris Martinez, that first neighbor that you interviewed that we just played, he had a text exchange with Bryan Kohberger, and this is Thanksgiving. So this is well after the murders. And Chris says, "Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family." And Bryan says, "Hey, thanks, man. Happy Thanksgiving." I mean, to think that this transpires just days after the killings. Did he elaborate on the communications and the nature of the communications that Bryan Kohberger had with him after the killings?
So what I think is interesting here is, you're right, this is only 11 days after the murders, when investigators are saying, hey, this is still a huge priority for us. We're going to be working through the Thanksgiving holiday. We're only about a week out of it. And then you saw the text right there. Bryan Kohberger actually is the one who texted his neighbors saying, "Happy Thanksgiving." And when I spoke to Martinez, he said, I wasn't really friends with Kohberger. I honestly kind of felt bad for him. So I was, saying, "Hey, thanks, man. Have a happy Thanksgiving, you too." Just kind of saying something that you would to someone who you would see in passing. So it's just kind of interesting that amidst these early stages of the investigation, Kohberger is saying something so nonchalant as, "Hey, have a happy Thanksgiving," kind of being thoughtful. And yet weeks later, he's going to be arrested for these gruesome murders.
It's really quite something. And great reporting, Sierra Gillespie. Thank you so much for being on again. Really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.